Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us at O'Donnell Learn for today's webinar, Propel, Driving Learner Success Through Purposeful Instructor Support. My name is Molly Butler, and I am a marketing manager here at O'Donnell Learn. Our session today should be about an hour, including interactive discussions and Q&A. You will notice the chat button on the bottom of the screen. I see that some of you already are, but please feel free to continue introducing yourselves in that area. Also use the chat and reactions button throughout the session to share comments with the entire group and put any questions you have in that space as well. Today's hosts are O'Donnell Learn's founder and CEO, Carrie O'Donnell, and Director of Learning Design, Dr. Brett Christie. With that, I'll hand it over to Carrie and Brett to briefly introduce themselves and get us started with today's session.
Why don't you start, Brett?
Okay, I'll start. Hello, everybody. Brett Christie, Director of Learning Design, and I started with O'Donnell Learn last year. Before that, I was in higher ed campus and system efforts for about 25 years, leading, well, first through faculty ranks, then working as a faculty developer at a campus for about 10 years, and then about 10 years at the Cal State system level, leading efforts related to online quality assurance, universal design for learning, accessibility, course redesign, cohorts, all sorts of things. And excited to share with you just some of the efforts we have going on through O'Donnell Learn and some of the resources we have today.
You can imagine how excited I was when Brett joined us last July with his great wealth of experience. And you'll see in some of what we're talking about how he's made such a huge difference in our organization and during this really tough time of a pandemic, and in helping us to really make sure we frame everything in terms of equity, inclusion, community, accessibility. So anyway, I'm Carrie O'Donnell. I founded O'Donnell Learn, believe it or not, 30 years ago when I was a mere babe. And I thought at that time that technology was going to change the way the world learns. And I was a little early to market on that concept, but it's definitely here now and it's here to stay. So we're looking forward to today. Let's take a look at the objectives. For those of you who are first timers to our webinars, we are all about interactivity. We use Padlet pretty extensively to create some discussions and create some shared learnings that we share out with you afterward. So today we're going to examine a research study that we did in August on faculty support needs. And then we're going to introduce a framework that we've created to help institutions create a shared understanding of what makes effective learning. It's called the Purposeful Learning Framework. We'll briefly touch on that. Some of you may be familiar with it. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to explore two models for supporting faculty post-pandemic. So let's get started on the research. So last summer, we conducted a study of faculty. And, you know, I don't know if you know this, but one of the services that O'Donnell has provided for many years is market research. And so we conducted a study last summer with faculty to really try to understand their needs as they evolve the learning experience and their support needs. And so we conducted 4 focus groups with faculty in different course areas across the country, and then a national survey. And we had sent to almost 10,000 faculty. We got in August, so you don't get great responses. So we had about 450 responses, and they represented a really representative spread of 2 to 4 year institutions, public and private and discipline areas. And we're going to just share just a couple of the highlights from that research. So the first thing is we asked faculty some questions to try to gauge where they are today in virtual and hybrid learning. And it was very interesting. If you look on the left up there in that bar, you'll see that 50%, 49% of the respondents said that their online and remote virtual courses mirror their face-to-face course. And similarly, and that kind of is not surprising because a lot of them had really just been online in the last 2 semesters during the remote and virtual world. So if you look at the bar pie chart on the right, you'll see that 42% have only taught online 1 to 2 terms or never taught online.
Hey, Carrie, my apologies, but we've got an echo and your audio dropped quite a bit about 30 seconds ago. It's hard for folks to hear. Yeah. We'll give you a moment to reconnect.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll take off. Sorry. Can you hear me? Do you still have an echo?
Okay. Sounds good to me. How about folks?
Everybody okay?
Everybody else good?
Is that good? Give me a thumbs up. That's better. Okay, great. Thanks. Feel free to interrupt at any time. Anyway, so as I was saying, half the faculty mirror their online face-to-face course, which is what new people online do, and almost half, 42%, are new to being online. And this is the interesting conundrum, is that we ask them how confident they are in their teaching their course online. And we ask them this question, we ask them confidence in student engagement, all different ways. And generally their answer was 6 on a scale of 1 to 7. So there's a bit of a disconnect into what needs to be done and where people are. So now, then we started to ask them a lot of questions about how they design for online, how they create their courses. And we thought this was very interesting. I think you will find it interesting too. We asked them how much time they spend prepping for their courses the first time they teach a course and in an existing course. And on average, first time they say they spend 49 hours prior to the course start and 23 to prep an existing course. And then interestingly enough, during the week, we asked them how much time they spend, fine-tuning lessons, activities, and assessments. So we're really just focused on the design and creation of the course, not on, grading and, doing the work. And they say they spend 8 hours a week on average. Now, some spend much less and some spend much more, but that was a wide average, a medium. Anyway, so you can see that they're spending faculty spend a lot of time on developing and delivering their online courses. And our goal is to make that time more effective. And that's what we'll talk about here in the way to support faculty. So, and more efficient. Let's move on. So we asked them what services they have access to. 450, Holly. We asked them what services they have access to, and I'm sorry, Holly, 450 participants for anyone who didn't see Holly's question in the chat. So we asked them what they have access to and what they're interested in using. So you can see that, more than half of the faculty are interested in many of these, the options we gave them. Now, by the way, the questions we asked came out of what faculty told us they needed, wanted, and are doing in our focus groups. So that's how we got the questions, right from faculty's mouth. So professional development workshop, most people have access to that these days, and particularly there were a lot of workshops with remote COVID. There may be a reason that more people have used it than are interested. One thing that came up quite a bit in the qualitative research in the focus groups was that faculty felt unengaged in these workshops. And so that was of concern to them. But they need support with LMS implementation, on-demand help, help for recording lectures and knowing how to do that, instructional design review, and suggestions on how to make the course better. Those are some of the things that came up. So let's go to the next slide. So then we asked them what course elements required support. And we gave them a list of 12 elements. And I'll give you the other ones afterward. And these were elements that were raised by our focus group participants. And we asked them to rank the top 5 in a rank. And so these are the percent of faculty these are the ones that were chosen 1 or 2 by the largest amount of faculty. So enhancing their media, so again, recording their lectures and enhancing media, higher student participation and engagement, in-class activities, student-centered discussions, and peer learning. And if you go to the next slide, it has a list of some of the other ones, project-based learning, et cetera. But it was interesting, improving academic integrity also came up a lot in our discussions because people were really worried about online assessment, and that issue has continued to be a problem with questions about proctoring. But community building and greater accessibility to content came up less frequently. And what we find in our boot camps, we do a boot camp called Jumpstart. In our boot camp, we find that once faculty are exposed to best practices and time-efficient tools and resources, and once we model some of the community building and accessibility in our boot camps, faculty are very excited and eager to focus on these essential learner-centered elements of the course. So one more slide on this, the survey, and that is, we gave them a list of tools and resources that they might, and asked them how interested in, which of them they're interested in. We asked them on a scale of 1 to 5. And these are the amount of faculty who expressed interest in each of them. And you can see it's a large majority, 72% want a library of examples. Of course, we all know that that's related to your discipline, you know, in examples that are relevant to me: assignment templates, interactive tools, tips and checklists, help with the LMS course, templates for the LMS, for doing things in the LMS. And so these came up in both the qualitative and quantitative. So I wonder just quickly if, as you guys look at this, if there are anything that comes to you that you're surprised about or that resonates most, if you can just jot that in chat, and then we're going to take a poll in a minute. Okay. So no big surprises here. Top 3 consistent with what I'm hearing. Yeah, I think so. I think that's what happens to us as well in our work. You know, we have 130 or so design professionals who work with faculty. We support them on hundreds of courses every year. So some of this came out of our work as well. So let's take a poll. Molly, if you could throw the poll up there. I want to think about, as you think about supporting faculty in the post-pandemic world, which is most useful for your institution? Okay, I think we'll end the poll. So yeah, this jives with what we learn, what we see in our work as well, is that faculty really, really appreciate one-on-one support with learning design experts. And actually, that's a timely time. And we also find that professional development is really, really important right now, particularly. And Brett's going to talk to you a little bit. This leads really nicely into the other thing we find about, I'm going to turn it to Brett.
Great, thanks, Carrie. Yeah, some of those certainly line up well. So we'll put it into some context here. Let's see, let's go ahead and get rid of the poll. So let's talk about creating a shared understanding. You know, often institutions will have their efforts, well, they always have efforts, of course, toward a greater student experience, toward more effective teaching and learning, but it's not often where it's really grounded to something that everybody can connect to in an effective way, in a purposeful way. And so what we've done over many years of our efforts and through research is we've come up with a framework. And the way we've developed this is, you know, working with hundreds of faculty across many institutions each year. And then also, as Carrie stated, I came with about 20 plus years of experience bringing that in. And I also happened to develop a framework through the Cal State system. And that was called the Quality Learning and Teaching Instrument. If folks are familiar with Quality Matters, it's like that, except just instead of just focusing on course design, it focuses on course design and delivery. It adds more humanizing elements. It adds more on universal design for learning, equity and inclusion. So those are some of the things that we've done differently. And so we've taken that and we've created a model that we use, and it works with faculty to go forward much more effectively in thinking about their course and using these as guideposts, and thinking about the student experience as they do their efforts. So some of those instruments may have up to, I looked at one recently that had 97 elements and a couple others that are in the ballpark of around 50 elements. We tend to look at about 25 of these different objectives or guideposts as a more manageable set. And then people can certainly go beyond that if they want to, but having those essential elements really sets the course off to a good start. And some of the things that really stand out, we call it purposeful learning. I'll talk about that a little bit more. You heard Carrie mention empathy earlier on. Equity and inclusion is huge. It's learner-centric or people-centric, and then humanized. We think about how to humanize the course from the beginning. When the students even first hear about the course or come across a syllabus, how are they getting a humanized experience that really speaks to them and it resonates with them? It gives a sense of welcome and belonging. They all feel like they see a place in the course. They see themselves in the course, but also where the course is taking them, whether it be further into the discipline or out into the work field. We focus a lot on collaboration as some of those results that Carrie showed earlier. I was pleased to see that there was a lot that was focused on the student experience, that it was student-centric. It wasn't just about content delivery. And one of the quotes we like to use from one of our colleagues is that teaching is about learners, not about content. And we really believe in that and emphasize that as we go through our experiences. And we always want to use evidence-based practices. So we'll talk about our framework, how that was informed by evidence-based practices, but how it can also be used as a process in gathering evidence along the way as you might implement something. And with this framework, we break it down into 8 objectives, or 8 elements, I should say. And on the left hand, you're going to see things that are more of essential elements that are more procedural, more structural. They're certainly critical in having that welcoming introduction, orienting students to the course, having your course be outcomes aligned as far as your content, your activities, and your experiences, all mapping back to those outcomes. And then having active and authentic learning where students are engaged and they also see the purpose of that learning and those experiences. And then when we talk about intentional instruction, that's where you are really intentional about how you sequence and chunk your content. And it's not these mass lectures, and then you push students off to do some sort of larger stakes assessment. It's really a matter of integrating chunks of content with self-checks and mini assessments, formative assessments. On the right side, you'll see more about the learner elements. So again, humanizing, empathy, class as community, really establishing that up front, that this is about a community of learners. What they can learn from each other is as important or more important than what they may learn from you. And then accessibility and affordability, we also put into that bucket as well. And of course, equity and inclusion. And we talk about a very broad definition of inclusion. So the way we start putting these into practice is we have a self-check that might be used by instructors. They can use it as a scorecard if they want to, but we have a self-check process. And so with this scorecard here, they can look at the 25 elements that we have, and they can look at their course and they can simply do a rating and find where they have their strengths and where they may have opportunities for making enhancements, and they can make notes. It's also something that's effective where they might be able to sit down with a learning designer and go over the course together, or the learning designer might be able to do a review and then work with the instructor in a consultation process. So it can be used in different ways, but provides a lot of effective guideposts for the instructors. And we also have examples for each of these as well that we provide either through our live training experiences or through online resources. So this is an example when we talk about having some sort of framework of grounding your institutional efforts to, this is something that everybody can connect to from their instructor role or instructional staff role, or if you are a faculty developer or director of academic technology, provost, associate provost. These are things that can help you to go forward with the instructional process as it relates to different elements of your institutional mission and being more effective in more students completing courses and graduating, and closing equity gaps, whatever it may be.
I want to make one comment there, which is that this tool is an open education resource. It's a OER pedagogy. It's free and open, as are a number of our tools. And we use it with our client engagements, but we are very committed to purposeful learning and the framework and the scorecard into helping institutions implement that. And if you're interested in learning more about it and how to implement it, throw your email in chat, and we'll be in touch with you. But we have videos and materials to help you get started with it. And we have found it to be an amazing framework, and that faculty respond so well to having a structure around their thinking. And we often say, okay, now that you've evaluated, or that our designer might have evaluated, or whatever, your course, let's just pick 3 things to work on right now. And those 3 things can make all the difference in changing and evolving a course. So
great. Thanks, Carrie. And folks, you can see the link in chat as well from Molly to the scorecard. So, and the other thing about the purposeful framework, it's not to be used necessarily as an evaluative process. It's really more formative and iterative. It's for feedback. It's for self-reflection. Institutions will have their own evaluation process. We don't touch into that at all. So this is really about more process-oriented. So let's talk about a centralized.
So it aligns well with Quality Matters, CULT, Oscar, and some of the ones. We have alignment matrices, so you can see how it aligns.
Yeah, no, we've done all that mapping for sure for those that are familiar with other models out there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about centralized instructional support models. So what will, every institution is going to have, let's say, a Center for Teaching and Learning where a lot of this effort resides, maybe also with the Center for Academic Technology, or hopefully an all-encompassing center, an all-inclusive center where all those resources and supports reside. It could be that these are bridged efforts, but all tend to reside under one domain. So this is where you would have your centralized efforts, and then these can happen in different ways. And so this is an area called what we call access. And this is where you have some ongoing opportunities available to individuals. And these could be, I think of this as sort of the snack model or the fast food model. This is where people can come and look at resources that you might have online through your center. You might have some templates, you might have some examples, you might have some videos of best practices, you might have a recording of a workshop, or they might be able to come to a live workshop or attend a live workshop. So these are kind of those short-term, small and focused type experiences that you might be propping up for your instructors. So those are the access points. And then you can also focus more in on the process model, which is where you have more supportive and sustaining efforts with instructors and interacting with staff and Center for Teaching and Learning directors. This is where you've got programming that's more in-depth and tends to be more long-term. It's not a drop-in workshop, get your coffee and Danish and off you go and hopefully you'll use something. It's actually putting it into practice through a process. This could be something like a faculty learning community. It could be an academic year-long new faculty orientation. It could be a mentoring program. So it's grounded to a structured process that all participants will go through, as opposed to sort of ad hoc accessing those resources. And then the last one is to try and get to the outcomes of your effort. So as you're supporting instructors, how can you help to determine how well those efforts are having an impact on their teaching, and ideally measuring that according to student learning, student outcomes. So how can you look at your programming and line that up to have some outcomes assessment? The Purposeful Learning Framework is a great way to do that. We've done that in different ways where you can have that modified into a teacher efficacy survey if you wanted to, and you can do a pre and post on those elements. If you wanted to, you could prop up many of those statements in the Purposeful Learning Framework into a student survey, and so you can do sort of a student satisfaction check. But going deeper, looking into data, you can also look at courses that have been redesigned according to this framework, let's say, and look at course completion rates, look at course GPAs, and also you can compare to see how different student populations are performing. Are equity gaps being closed because there's this more purposeful and inclusive design taking place and interaction taking place? And so by doing that, you can measure what's happening with instructors, but also collectively what's happening through your Center for Teaching and Learning or other units efforts. And so you can really get some good data by doing these stages and going to that outcomes level. Let's see. Also, as you get into these outcomes, you have data for reporting, which is always great. You can also think about how you're disseminating some of the best practices, how you're capturing those effective practices. So if you see an instructor has a significant gain in student completion rates, then how can you find out what they're doing so well? How can you grab some of those elements and actually disseminate those across the larger group of faculty? And then the last thing is sometimes there's friction between focusing effort on teaching and focusing effort on research at certain institutions. But if you can do what's called scholarship of teaching and learning, you can really try and bring the two things together in how an instructor can focus on their course design and delivery and outcomes, and actually get into a model of producing scholarship related to that, which can then be published to their disciplinary journals, shared out through conferences, et cetera. So it brings more of that across from the teaching to the research tracks. And so that can help to kind of double up efforts. So what we want to do to engage with you for just a bit is have you go to this Padlet. And so Molly, if you could drop that link into the chat, and that'll take us there live as well. And we'll have you respond and share what are some of the things that are happening for you across those three different areas of access, process, and outcomes. And there's an extra bucket off to the right if you have additional thoughts. You could mention maybe some of the barriers, but what are some of the things you're doing to create some of those access points? What are the more purposeful processes you're engaging in? And then how are you checking to see what's working? How do you know, and to what effect?
Great.
And I will periodically refresh here so our live view gets populated. Yeah, in the second column there, I see adding a position of an instructional design specialist. You know, I've been following the instructional designer or learning designer role for over 10 years now, and just watching that evolve and watching how that's becoming a much more central support position that is so critical as we've been coming to this crux of teaching and technology over time, but COVID has thrown us into that big time. And so a lot more focus in that area, and I'm thrilled to see that happening.
But we all know that there are just not nearly enough learning designers to support all the faculty.
Oh gosh,
country.
Yeah.
And there was one pretty comprehensive study. It was in 2016, so you could assume there are quite a few more now, but 14,000 instructional designers to support 1.5 million faculty. That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Good point.
We've seen a lot increasingly these Learning Commons websites. That is really great. And there's so many open resources out there. And actually it's sometimes the challenge is curating and making sure that you get faculty the right thing at the right time.
Perfect. And I'm seeing the technology versus pedagogy mentioned in the first column there. Absolutely. Often with the LMS, it may be led or presented in a way of sort of clickology. Oh, there's this feature. You could access this feature and use this feature or this feature. But it's really about modeling how to do that effectively for representing content or engaging students, giving feedback, all of those effective practices. It's not just about the tool set. So absolutely. I see technical support mentioned. You do need a certain amount of technical support. I'm not anti-tech support or anti-technical, obviously. You have to have a certain level of proficiency to get to those effective practices.
Yeah, we were talking to a colleague of ours a couple of weeks ago who was saying that it's a real struggle on her campus because the academic technology team is there to support the technology, and then the CTL is there to support the pedagogy, but it's really the finding that intersection between the technology and the pedagogy can be very challenging in the support models at many institutions.
Right. I see in column one the ID tips that are put out at one institution weekly, and now over 60 tips. If you want to add the URL to that in your comment, that would be great for folks. I bet they would be interested to see what these look like if you're willing to share those.
It's great.
And those tiny drip efforts do accumulate. So it's okay to do drips and just have that constant feed of information. And then you might have this deep program that happens occasionally with a smaller subset. Thanks, Brianna.
Those other, the faculty mentoring programs, we've seen a huge rise in them this year. And it's really, and we know that faculty really appreciate other faculty supporting them. A number of our learning designers on our team, many of them are faculty members as well. And so having, being able to support each other, it's more of a peer-to-peer, it really is helpful. But the other thing, I like your faculty appreciation, because one of the things we're hearing just from a lot of schools is that, one, faculty who are doing the mentoring are getting burned out, but faculty are burnt out in general. And so just really giving time to give a little empathy and appreciation for our faculty is just so important.
Yeah. And that transfer from classroom to online, and how that is such a different realm and reality, and getting faculty to see that hopefully ahead of time so that they're prepared. And of course, the rapid move to remote instruction that we had a year ago, nobody could have been prepared for that if they weren't used to teaching online. But now with more time, how can folks be more intentional? And that's the word I keep coming back to, is that intentionality. If you are very intentional in your instruction, you're going to be much more adaptable to different circumstances.
So this is really great. I think we'll keep adding to this. What we do after these webinars is we share this out. You have access to this so you can hear what other people are doing and see what other people are doing when you have time to think about it. So let's go back to our thing.
All right, you got it.
So a responsive support model, decentralized and personalized. So we wanted to share with you a model that we've been working on at O'Donnell that we're getting a lot of really great feedback on, and we're working with a number of schools and different elements of it. But I think it's a model that can be really helpful for some of the issues of, the balance of technical, academic technology, and technical and pedagogical support for faculty, and the various different ways that faculty need to be just supported, and the fact that faculty are in such different places on their journey. And also sometimes, thinking back to that first slide of how sometimes faculty think that they're more confident in their online teaching than their students are really, and than the students feel. So there's a lot of challenge, because you want to support faculty and make them really successful, and you want to be empathetic about it. So we've been working on this decentralized support model. And one of the other things I want to mention as we move into this is that our thinking is, if faculty spend 8 hours a week on the creation of the course, and they spend 23 hours to prep for a course that they've taught last semester, that's a lot of time. That could be that could be 150 hours of time, right? And what we want to do is have a support model that makes that time more efficient and more effective for faculty, so they feel like they're making a really big difference with the time they spend and invest in it, because that's a lot of time for them to invest, especially adjunct faculty who aren't paid as well. So we've come up, this model has kind of 4 elements, and I'm going to just walk really quickly through them. So the first one is action learning. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with or do any work on workforce professional development, corporate development, but they use this term frequently. And it means that you work on your own projects as part of the learning experience. We call it learning by doing. And we've designed all of our boot camps around faculty creating their courses while they learn. And then the other way you can learn by doing is have micro learning experiences that are very tailored and personalized that faculty could access. So the second is specialized coaching. And that's, we like to think of that as expert support network like the Apple Genius Bar that can be used to elevate a specific problem. So like if a faculty member has a question about the LMS implementation, it can become an opportunity to actually elevate the learning experience around the LMS. So reorganizing your Canvas course so that students can navigate more quickly through it, and it can improve the student experience. The third is personalized resources. So, you know, and obviously in our access conversation, a lot of you are providing these amazing resources for faculty. So, but think Spotify for teaching and learning. Your faculty can build and share libraries of tools, discipline-focused exemplars, and automated design templates. And it's also about, you know, making sure that what you get is tailored to what you need at that moment, so that you can quickly find, if really what you're trying to do is implement authentic learning in your class, you need to be able to quickly find examples of people in your discipline area that have projects of authentic learning projects, and then templates to help you actually create one for yourself. So the next one is implementation support, and that's about realizing outcomes, right? So providing targeted and specialized execution support to lower your barriers and increase your likelihood of success as an instructor. So faculty can have virtual access to specialized experts as like academic technologists, designers, media producers, technical support. And in our experience, faculty who have implementation support see improvements in their students' performance and satisfaction. And that creates their own cycle of improvement because they get very excited about continually improving as they see their students becoming more engaged in the course. And then the last piece is just we wrap that all up. And I just think, I know Brett mentioned it, and it's really important as part of the process, but creating a learning community and collaborating around the teaching and learning experience. So these are kind of elements and that we're seeing institutions do, we're working on at our organization. And what we'd love to do is we'd love to hear from you, you know, what do you think about this whole idea of a flexible, responsive, personalized model for supporting faculty? And, you know, what's your reaction to this idea, to the model? Is this something, you know, you could see yourselves implementing? Which elements resonate the most with you? And what are the barriers to implementing it successfully? So let's go into the Padlet.
And just to confirm, you've got the link in the chat now, folks. Action learning resonating, nice.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. We have a, you know, in our, we have so much fun in our boot camps, and the faculty really have a great time because we really model best practices, and we model making mistakes. And people walk out with a real community, but they walk out with real tangible changes to their course. But also, like we put them in the shoes of the student, and they can see how the student are and how they feel, and it's really great. So I think action learning is everything. Yeah, the Spotify for teaching.
Only make mistakes so we can model humanizing. That's the only reason.
Oh, because we're so perfect.
Yeah.
I make about one mistake every 2 minutes. Like forgetting to put people in breakout rooms. And everyone's waiting. So what are the barriers? Change, aversion, and cultural shift. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, you know, it's interesting. You know, one of the things, in one of our partner institutions, Corinne at St. Francis talks about how we use the process of our faculty work with St. Francis to create FOMO on her campus. And so all of a sudden people were like, they wanted to be partaking in these things. So kind of finding that early group and getting them really engaged and excited can make a huge difference. Budget is such a big barrier. And it's one of the reasons, that we're working on this right now. O'Donnell's history is to make, to do these, do entire degree programs, right? Online degree programs and build, micro-credential programs for schools and to support schools in building media-rich programs and courses, et cetera. But we are really, really, really committed to serving the underserved and serving institutions that don't have the financial resources to hire firms like ours to do these huge projects. And so this whole set of, this whole decentralized support model that we're creating, we're developing it to create a budget, really affordable program for institutions and to help you with your staffing issues so that, you can staff this yourself, of course, but if you need some help, you can have access to our virtual experts in the model. Lack of time.
And seeing budget.
Yeah.
And seeing budget come up multiple times, it always, reminds me that, yes, there are budget constraints, but budgets for something like effective instruction, often it's about priorities. So, often there's money somewhere, but it's about priorities. Where is that money going? Where could it be going? Could more of it be going to instructional support?
Yeah, that's good. So reactions to the process. So positive, every teacher needs to develop in their own way. That's where it comes from. It's like you have things that you do really well, and building on that is really gonna get you to where you want to be. And in our experience, the large majority of faculty, and not everyone, really does want to create a more engaging and more effective experience for their students. They want their students to graduate, to matriculate through the course, and they want to be supportive to individual student needs. And so the framework that we have really helps you to make that continual evolution. Well, this is great. I think we can go back and wrap it up. Thank you. I love this. I love the reactions that you got. I think that there's opportunity to have more reactions. So we're developing, O'Donnell's got a series of offerings that we already launched to the world, and we are really engaged with institutions on. And one is a boot camp called Jumpstart, where we use the purposeful learning framework and we have a lot of fun and model great learning. It's a virtual boot camp. And then we also have a program called Propel, where we actually provide one-on-one virtual support to faculty and institutions by a team of our designers and a team of our experts for a monthly subscription. And then we support them in different ways. And some is in using the framework and working one-on-one with faculty to really evaluate and evolve their courses. And then the last thing we have, we're building, and we're also building a really interesting faculty concierge program. And we're going to do a webinar about it sometime, because we'd love to get some of your feedback on some of our ideas for it. But it's kind of that kind of combination of that's the Apple Genius Bar, okay? So it's a combination of giving faculty access to technical support, to academic technology support, to learning design support, and to evolve the course on a continual basis, and nudging faculty and giving them access to personalized tools. So it's really kind of the whole shebang. And it's all being delivered in this platform that we're developing called Nectar. And that we are putting together, we're in the process of building Nectar, and we're looking for institutions that want to play with us. that want to be individuals, particularly, I know there's a lot of instructional designers we're registered today, instructional designers and academic technology and heads of CTL to really try out our tools, become part of our design panel, become part of our community of learning and practice around this whole decentralized support model. And you'll learn and be able to bring things home to your institution. And so anyone who's interested, yes, Mary, throw your email in there and we'll, or just throw your name in there. I think we have your email because you're registered. If you're interested in participating, and we would love to have you be part of our team on this. Okay, and I think we're about ready to wrap this. Brett, turn it to you.
Yeah, just sure. Remind folks of some of the takeaway resources. So you'll get the slides and the recording from the session, and then you have the link to the framework. We'll get that to you as well in the follow-up. And then we'll also make sure that the 2 Padlet links are there. So if any of those ideas stood out to you, you can go back and follow up or capture some of those. So those are the main things that we wanted to share with you. And then if you wanted to get in touch with any questions or comments, we can certainly do that now. We have a little bit of time, and you've got our email information there, or through Twitter, however you want to do that. And we'd love to hear more and engage with you more in the future. Great, thanks, Mary.
Thank you. Yeah, this is it. We're wrapping it now. Just want to let you know the next webinar is Learn While Doing. We all talked about action learning, and we'll share with you how we do it. And maybe we'll practice some of the things we do. And I'm glad you found this to be engaging, many of you, and that it was helpful. And please join us again. We do these regularly on Wednesdays, 1 or 2 times a month. And we always are very committed to sharing out our learnings and our tools.